I thought opening our marriage would set me free, but I never expected my husband to be the one to walk away first. Vanessa let her gaze drift to the window, watching as people bustled along the sidewalk outside. She envied them in a way, the ones laughing into their coffee cups, the couples holding hands as if the world wasn't pulling them apart inch by inch. She used to feel that way with Gavin, didn't she? Or had she only convinced herself she did? Sabrina tapped her fingers against her mug, bringing Vanessa back to the present. So, she said, tilting her head, if you could snap your fingers and change one thing about your marriage, what would it be? Vanessa exhaled, shaking her head. I don't know. I mean, I do, but it sounds so selfish. Sabrina rolled her eyes. Ness, please. If you can't be honest with me, who can you be honest with? Vanessa hesitated before speaking. I just want to feel wanted. Not in a he kisses me goodnight and asks how my day was kind of way, but really wanted. Like when we first got together, when every touch felt electric, when we couldn't keep our hands off each other. Her voice dropped lower. Now I feel like we're just existing next to each other. Sabrina nodded, a knowing look flashing across her face. You don't just want love. You want passion. Vanessa swallowed hard. Yeah. Silence settled between them, thick and heavy. Sabrina took a slow sip of her coffee before setting it down. So what now? Are you looking for that passion with Gavin, or? She trailed off, leaving the question hanging in the air like a loaded gun. Vanessa's stomach twisted. She knew exactly what Sabrina was asking. Had she already been looking for something, or someone else? A memory flashed in her mind, uninvited yet impossible to ignore. A lingering glance. A hand brushing against hers just a second too long. A conversation filled with laughter that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. She had told herself it was harmless. Just a friendship. But was it? Vanessa tore her gaze away, suddenly feeling exposed. I don't know, she admitted, barely above a whisper. Sabrina studied her carefully before leaning in, her voice gentle but firm. Be careful, Ness. If you're not honest with yourself about what you want, you might end up making choices you can't take back. Vanessa nodded, but deep down she wasn't sure she had any control over what came next. Vanessa swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. But what if he thinks this means I don't love him anymore? Her voice was barely above a whisper, laced with uncertainty. Sabrina didn't hesitate. She leaned in, her expression steady and knowing. Ness, this isn't about love. You love Gavin, you always have. But love and desire aren't the same thing. Wanting more doesn't mean you love him any less. Vanessa exhaled slowly, her gaze drifting toward the window as she tried to steady her thoughts. But what if he doesn't understand? What if this hurts him? Sabrina gave a small, knowing smile. Then you talk. You help him see that this isn't about pushing him away, it's about finding a way to bring back what you've lost. Maybe even something new. Vanessa let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, Sabrina admitted. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. Vanessa sat back, her mind a whirlwind of fear and curiosity. Could she really have this conversation? Could she ask for more without unraveling everything they'd built? As she looked at Sabrina, she saw something in her friend's expression. Certainty, confidence, the kind of assurance that came from having already walked this path. And suddenly Vanessa wasn't sure what scared her more. The idea that Gavin might say no, or the possibility that he might say yes. She could feel her pulse hammering in her ears, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was it, the conversation that could change everything. I love the life we've built, Gavin. I do, she started, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. But lately I felt restless. Like something inside me is pulling me in a different direction, and I don't know how to ignore it anymore. Gavin's brow furrowed slightly, but he remained calm. Restless how? He asked, his tone measured, careful. Vanessa exhaled, forcing herself to hold his gaze. It's not about us being unhappy. You're a wonderful husband. But I feel like I'm missing something that makes me feel alive again. A flicker of concern crossed his face, but he stayed quiet, letting her continue. I need to explore what that means for me, she admitted, her fingers tightening around the napkin in her lap. I need to see if there's more out there for me without losing what we have. Gavin leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. Are you saying you want to leave? No, she said quickly, shaking her head. That's not what I want at all. I want us, but I also want freedom. Not in a way that takes anything away from you, but in a way that lets me figure out what I need. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Gavin let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand over his jaw. You mean, seeing other people? Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. Not to replace what we have. Just to feel something different. She watched as his expression shifted. Surprise, confusion, something deeper that she couldn't quite read. Finally he spoke, his voice quieter now. I don't know what to say to that. Vanessa's heart clenched. I don't expect an answer right away. I just need you to know where I'm at. Gavin studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. All right, he said, his voice unreadable. Let's talk about this. And just like that, everything had changed. Vanessa's heart pounded, though she wasn't sure if it was from relief or something far more unsettling. She had braced herself for an argument, some sign that Gavin would fight to keep things the way they were. But instead, he had met her request with a quiet acceptance, his calmness almost unnerving. Are you really okay with this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She searched his face for a reaction, for a flicker of hesitation, something to make this feel real. I don't want to hurt you. Gavin held her gaze, his expression unreadable. I meant what I said, Vanessa. I want you to be happy. The words landed heavily between them, but there was something about the way he said them that made her stomach twist. He wasn't angry. He wasn't questioning it. He wasn't fighting. She had expected anything but this. Nodding slowly, Vanessa forced herself to accept his words, even as unease crept through her. Okay, she murmured. Without another word, Gavin stood, picking up his plate and carrying it to the sink, as if they had just discussed weekend plans rather than reshaping their entire marriage. Vanessa sat frozen, watching him move through the kitchen with the same practiced ease as every other night. But nothing felt the same. She had wanted this. She had asked for this. So why did it suddenly feel like she had lost something she couldn't get back? Vanessa had lost control of the conversation that night with Gavin, and now that feeling clung to her like a second skin, an itch she couldn't quite scratch. No matter how much she had thought she was steering the conversation, in the end, Gavin had made his own decision. And that unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. A few days later, she and Sabrina stepped into a neon-lit nightclub, the kind of place they hadn't visited in years. The bass pulsed beneath their feet, vibrating through the air as bodies moved in rhythm with the music. Streaks of colored light flashed through the dim space, illuminating faces lost in the energy of the night. There was something intoxicating about it all, the reckless abandon, the promise of possibility. Vanessa exhaled, trying to let herself sink into it, to embrace the excitement buzzing around her. But the doubt lingered. It's almost too easy, she muttered, her gaze flicking across the room. Sabrina chuckled, shaking her head. That's because he's thinking about his own options too. Trust me, guys like to act cool, but Gavin's probably already planning his own adventure. She nudged Vanessa playfully. Don't overthink it. This is going to be good for both of you. Vanessa tried to swallow down the unease twisting in her stomach. She took a deep breath, then forced a smile. And what about you? She asked, shifting the focus. Does your husband know you're here tonight? Sabrina's smirk didn't falter. Of course, she said smoothly. He doesn't mind. We have an understanding. Before Vanessa could press further, Sabrina waved down the bartender and ordered a round of drinks. She lifted her glass, her eyes twinkling with excitement. To freedom and new adventures. Vanessa hesitated for half a second before clinking her glass against Sabrina's. The drink burned warm as it slid down her throat, smoothing out the edges of her nerves. She let the music wash over her, let the energy of the room pull her in. And just like that she let go. Laughter bubbled from her lips as they made their way to the dance floor, bodies swaying and hands lifted in the air. The tension that had gripped her for days began to loosen with every beat of the song, every sip of her drink. The night blurred in a haze of flashing lights and fleeting touches. People drifted in and out of their orbit, each conversation laced with flirtation, every lingering glance a silent invitation. And with each passing moment, Vanessa felt something shift inside her, the hesitation fading, the weight lifting. By the time the night wore on, the group had begun to scatter, each person slipping into their own little corner of the crowded space. Vanessa barely noticed when she was no longer with Sabrina. Because standing in front of her now, meeting her gaze with a look that sent a rush of heat through her, was someone new. Someone who wasn't Gavin. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't stop herself from seeing where this would lead. Vanessa and Adrian found themselves in a quieter corner of the club, their conversation deepening with every passing moment. There was something different about the way he looked at her, curious, drawn in, as if seeing a side of her she hadn't even realized she was showing. This feels different, Adrian murmured, his voice low, the space between them growing smaller. I've never seen you like this before. Vanessa didn't reply. She didn't have to. She felt it too, an undeniable pull, a shift in the air between them. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. They simply moved forward as if this had always been inevitable. A short cab ride later, they arrived at a small motel on the outskirts of town. Neither of them spoke as they stepped inside, their intentions clear. The thrill of it coursed through Vanessa like an electric current, a doorway into something new, a taste of the freedom she had longed for. But by morning, as sunlight crept through the curtains, the excitement had already begun to fade. What was left behind wasn't clarity or fulfillment, but something quieter, something heavier. By the time Vanessa arrived home, the house had settled into its usual morning stillness. But today that silence felt different, hollow almost. Normally by this hour Gavin would be up, sipping his coffee, easing into the day like he always did. But as she moved through the house, checking the bedroom, the kitchen, even stepping onto the back patio, there was no sign of him. A flicker of unease prickled at the edges of her mind. Frowning, she reached for her phone and dialed his number. It rang a few times before he finally answered. "Hey," he said, his voice calm but distant. "Where are you?" she asked carefully, trying to steady the nervous energy coiling in her chest. "I just needed some time to think," he replied, his tone unreadable. "I'll be home by dinner." Vanessa swallowed. "Are you okay?" Pause. Then, yeah. "Just a lot to handle right now." She took a slow breath, gripping the phone tighter. "All right, take care." The call ended, but the strange feeling didn't fade. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the house in warm golden light, Vanessa heard the familiar sound of Gavin's footsteps at the door. But something told her that whatever walked through that door wouldn't be the same man she had kissed goodnight just days ago. Vanessa greeted Gavin with a warm smile as he stepped inside, setting his briefcase down by the entryway. "Long day?" she asked, raising an eyebrow playfully. Gavin let out a small breath, rolling his shoulders as if trying to shake off the weight of it all. "Everything," he said simply, his tone even, unreadable. Vanessa shifted on her feet, her nerves creeping in. "You know, this open marriage thing," she began cautiously, forcing a lightness into her voice. "Has it meant anything to you? Are you getting anything out of it?" Gavin picked up his glass and took a slow sip before setting it back down, considering her words. "Honestly, I haven't had time to think about it," he admitted. "This project at work has been eating up all my energy. Maybe once things settle, I'll have a clearer perspective on that part of things." A flicker of disappointment ran through Vanessa. She wasn't sure what answer she had been hoping for, but this felt strange. Like she had taken a leap into something new, but Gavin was still standing on the ledge, untouched by it. Before she could say anything, he met her gaze, his expression steady. "And how did it make you feel?" he asked, his voice calm but with something beneath it, something searching. "Is this really what you wanted?" Vanessa hesitated for a beat too long, but the words slipped out before she could second-guess them. "Actually, yeah, Gavin. I feel good. Like I have this energy again, this spark I haven't felt in years." For the briefest moment, something flickered in Gavin's eyes, something unreadable, but just as quickly it was gone. He nodded slowly, offering a small smile. "Well, I'm happy for you, Vanessa." His voice was smooth, composed, but something about it unsettled her. She had expected him to be indifferent or maybe even relieved. But instead, there was an edge to his words that she couldn't quite place. Then, almost too casually, Gavin leaned against the counter, swirling the last bit of his drink in his glass. "Speaking of new experiences," he said, his tone shifting slightly, "I'm hosting something this weekend. A little, grown-up gathering." He met her gaze, the faintest hint of amusement tugging at the corners of his lips. "Something I think you'd find very interesting. Unlike anything you've ever experienced before." Vanessa blinked, caught off guard. This was new. Unexpected. And for the first time she realized she wasn't the only one who had stepped through that open door. Vanessa hesitated, her fingers hovering over her phone. Gavin had insisted she bring Sabrina along, which only deepened the mystery surrounding whatever kind of party this was going to be. She was intrigued, curious even, but there was something else lingering beneath the surface. Unease. She needed more information. Dialing Sabrina's number, she waited, her nerves twisting into a strange mix of anticipation and uncertainty. Sabrina picked up almost immediately. "Hey Vanessa, you all set for tomorrow?" Vanessa chuckled, though there was an edge to it. "That depends. What exactly are we walking into?" Sabrina laughed, her tone light and teasing. "Oh, come on, Vanessa. You're overthinking it." "Maybe," Vanessa admitted. She paused, chewing on her lip. Do you think Gavin's really okay with this? He acts like he doesn't care, like he's too busy with work to even think about it. Oh please, Sabrina scoffed. He's probably using work as an excuse. Trust me, men hate admitting they're doing the same thing. It's like they want you to believe they're above it all. A flicker of something, jealousy, uncertainty, rose inside Vanessa, but she swallowed it down. Maybe you're right, she murmured. I just wish he'd show something. Anything. Sabrina's voice softened, though it still carried that confident, almost dismissive reassurance. Forget about Gavin for a night, Ness. Just let go and enjoy yourself. Vanessa hesitated, but curiosity pulled her forward. So what exactly is this party? Sabrina let out a knowing laugh. Let's just say, it involves a little teamwork. Vanessa's pulse quickened, a rush of adrenaline curling through her. Teamwork, she repeated, intrigued. Oh, you'll see, Sabrina teased. Just get ready for a night you won't forget. The thrill of the unknown was intoxicating. And that was exactly what Vanessa had been craving. By the time Saturday night arrived, she had her story prepared. She told Gavin she'd be out with Sabrina, making it sound like nothing more than a typical girls' night. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even hesitate. And as Vanessa stepped into the night, into the unknown, she realized something. For the first time in a long time, she wanted to be somewhere Gavin wasn't. Vanessa had expected something extravagant, but this was beyond what she had imagined. Adrian's house was stunning, sleek and modern, but with an effortless charm that made it feel inviting rather than intimidating. A warm golden glow spilled from the backyard, reflecting off the shimmering surface of the pool. Music pulsed through the night air, blending seamlessly with the hum of laughter and conversation. As they stepped inside, Vanessa took it all in. This was no small gathering. The party was big, wilder than she had anticipated. Dozens of unfamiliar faces moved around the space, drinks in hand, their energy light, uninhibited. There was an unspoken understanding here, a looseness, a freedom she hadn't felt in years. You're thinking too much, Sabrina teased, nudging her playfully. She kicked off her shoes and tossed her purse onto a lounge chair before flashing Vanessa a wicked grin. Come on. And with that, she dove into the pool with a splash. Vanessa hesitated, heat creeping up her neck. She wasn't sure why, but something about the moment, about all of this, felt like a line she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. Adrian appeared beside her, pressing a cool glass into her hand. Drink? He offered, his eyes dancing with amusement. Vanessa took a sip, letting the liquid burn smooth and warm down her throat, her nerves easing slightly. Around her, the atmosphere was intoxicating, light, carefree, charged with an electric kind of recklessness. It reminded her of something she had forgotten, a version of herself she had long since tucked away. She had told herself she was ready for this. She had assured herself she was. The night blurred in a haze of flashing lights and teasing laughter. Sabrina was in her element, seamlessly blending into the wild rhythm of the party. The music swelled, the lights flickered in soft hues, and the playful flirtations turned into something heavier, more intimate. And then, Adrian was beside her again, his arm draped lightly around her waist, his breath warm against her ear. So, Vanessa, he murmured, his voice low, knowing. Ready for a new experience? His touch was easy, confident, familiar in a way that sent a slow shiver down her spine. His gaze held an invitation she had spent all night flirting with, and across the room, Sabrina caught her eye, lifting her glass in a silent toast. This is it, her expression seemed to say. Just let go. But suddenly, Vanessa couldn't. The thrill that had fueled her all night, the rush of being someone else, flickered and twisted into something else entirely. Doubt. She had spent so long chasing freedom, but standing here on the very edge of it, something inside her shifted. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was running towards something new, or away from something she wasn't ready to lose. She wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. The thrill she had been chasing, the one that had seemed so exhilarating in theory, felt different now. The hands reaching toward her, the voices coaxing her forward, the warmth of Adrian's body so close. It wasn't excitement she felt anymore. It was something heavier. Something she couldn't ignore. Vanessa, come on, Sabrina urged, her tone light but insistent. You are having fun. Just relax. You'll love it if you give it a chance. Vanessa shook her head, her discomfort finally breaking through the haze. I really can't, Sabrina, she said, her voice quieter now, more certain. I need more time. Adrian exchanged a glance with Sabrina before offering Vanessa an easy smile. He gave her shoulder a light squeeze. It's fine, he said smoothly. You should go at your own pace. Then, with a playful smirk, he added, "Besides, I'm sure there are plenty of people here willing to keep you entertained." Sabrina rolled her eyes but didn't press further. Within seconds she was swept back into the party, the music pulling her into another conversation, another thrill. Vanessa, however, remained rooted in place. Her mind raced, the night pressing down on her in a way she hadn't expected. She had spent weeks convincing herself that this was what she wanted, that this was what she needed. But now, sitting alone as the party buzzed around her, she felt something else creeping in. Doubt. Had she misunderstood Gavin? Had she been so focused on chasing excitement that she hadn't seen what was right in front of her? The unreadable look in his eyes, the calmness that didn't feel like calm at all, it lingered in her mind like an unanswered question. Hours passed and the party began to slow. The crowd thinned, the lights dimmed, and voices turned softer. Sabrina, still glowing with the high of the night, found Vanessa sitting alone and nudged her playfully. "Hey, you good? You disappeared on me?" Vanessa managed a small smile, but inside, her thoughts were far from still. For the first time all night, she wasn't thinking about Adrian or the party, or the rush of something new. She was thinking about Gavin. And she couldn't shake the one question she had tried so hard to ignore. What had he been doing while she was here? That truly shattered her, the one thing she hadn't seen coming. Gavin hadn't just been watching. He had been waiting. Vanessa stood frozen in her own home, her fingers trembling around the divorce papers, the bold, unforgiving letters blurring before her eyes. She felt like the walls were closing in, suffocating her in the very life she thought she had control over. This can't be happening. The words echoed in her head, but deep down she knew the truth. It was happening. She had believed Gavin was indifferent, that he had simply accepted the changes she proposed. But now she realized he had never agreed. He had decided. The calmness in his voice, the unreadable looks, the eerie way he had let her go without a fight, it was all leading to this moment. Her phone felt heavy in her hands as she fumbled to call him, needing, begging, for an explanation. But the moment she saw his last message, everything inside her went cold. There's nothing left to say. Take care. Formal. Distant. Final. Vanessa sank onto the couch, the weight of reality crushing down on her. There would be no conversation, no second chances. Gavin hadn't just left, he had erased her. And just when she thought things couldn't possibly get worse, they did. The next morning at work, she sensed the shift immediately. The friendly nods, the casual smiles, gone. Conversations died the moment she entered the room. The once familiar faces of her colleagues were now laced with something else. Judgment. It didn't take long to find out why. Gavin had been meticulous. He had gathered everything, her messages with Adrian, the photos, even the smallest details of her nights out. He hadn't confronted her. He hadn't warned her. Instead, he had waited, collecting every shred of evidence until he had enough to destroy her. And then came the courtroom. Vanessa sat motionless, a ghost moving through the wreckage of her own life. She barely heard the voices around her, barely processed the cold, methodical way Gavin's attorney laid it all out. Text messages, surveillance records, private investigator reports. Her nights with Sabrina. The flirtations with Adrian. The infamous party. Piece by piece, every reckless decision was picked apart, dissected, laid bare for all to see. No escape. No defense. No way to undo what had already been done. She had thought she was the one making choices. She had thought she was in control. But Gavin had been playing a different game entirely. And in the end she had never even seen it coming. Vanessa never saw it coming. Gavin hadn't just exposed her, he had destroyed everything. He had sent everything to Eric, Sabrina's husband. Every text. Every photo. Every detail. The truth hit like a wrecking ball. Sabrina's so-called understanding with Eric had been a lie. He hadn't known. He hadn't agreed. And when he found out, he wasted no time. He filed for divorce immediately. The fallout was swift and merciless. Friends turned their backs. Alliances shattered overnight. The same circle that had once admired Sabrina's boldness now wanted nothing to do with her. She became a pariah, her confidence replaced with raw humiliation. And Vanessa? She was the first person Sabrina cut out. Vanessa could hardly blame her. But losing Sabrina was nothing compared to what she had already lost. And that's why, after everything, she still needed to see him. She needed to understand. Sitting across from Gavin now, she felt the weight of everything pressing down between them. Her hands trembled as she reached for his, desperation welling in her chest. "Gavin, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. Tears burned at the edges of her vision. "I made a mistake. A huge one. I thought this would bring us closer. Help us understand each other better. I was only with Adrian once and at the party. I couldn't go through with it. Please forgive me. Gavin exhaled slowly, his gaze unreadable. Vanessa, he said, his voice steady, heavy. She could barely breathe. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I wanted this to end cleanly. Maybe I went too far. Maybe it seems cruel. He paused, his expression unreadable. But the moment you started keeping things from me, that was the moment I knew we were done. His eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. There was no anger, no bitterness. But there was also no warmth. I don't think we can fix this, Vanessa, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I just don't. And in that moment she knew. It was over. That night, as Vanessa drove home, the world outside blurred into streaks of headlights and neon signs. She gripped the steering wheel, her breath uneven, her mind spiraling through every choice, every mistake, every moment that had led her here. She had chased passion. She had chased freedom. And she had lost everything. She didn't know what came next. She didn't know if she'd ever find peace. But for now, all she had was this moment. And the weight of everything she had lost. The days that followed felt surreal, like Vanessa was watching her own life from the outside. Everything had unraveled so quickly, so completely, that she barely had time to process the wreckage left behind. Work became unbearable. The whispers, the judgmental glances, she felt them all. Conversations stopped when she walked into a room. Colleagues who once greeted her warmly now avoided her altogether. It was only a matter of time before she was asked to resign. Sabrina never answered her calls. Not that she expected her to. And Gavin? He had moved out. Just like that. His side of the closet empty, his favorite mug missing from the kitchen counter. The finality of it made her stomach twist. She had thought there would be more, something. More anger. More fighting. More time to fix it. But Gavin had made his choice. And she was alone. Vanessa spent the first week in a fog, barely eating, barely sleeping. She replayed every conversation, every decision, wondering where exactly she had lost control. She had convinced herself this was what she wanted, that opening their marriage would lead to something exciting, something liberating. Instead, it had left her hollow. One evening, she found herself parked outside Gavin's new apartment. She didn't even remember driving there. She just sat, staring at the lit windows, wondering if she had any right to knock. Before she could decide, the front door opened. Gavin stepped out. And he wasn't alone. Vanessa's breath caught in her throat as she watched him walk beside a woman, tall, dark-haired, effortlessly beautiful. They were talking, laughing softly, completely at ease with each other. Vanessa felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Of course he had moved on. Had he met her before the divorce? Had this always been part of his plan? Or had he simply done what Vanessa had claimed to want, taken his own freedom and run? She should have looked away. She should have left before he saw her. But she didn't. Because for the first time, she wasn't wondering what he had been doing all this time. She was wondering if he had ever looked back at her the way she was looking at him now. Vanessa didn't know how long she sat there, watching Gavin disappear into his new life. She told herself she would leave, turn the key, drive away, forget. But her fingers remained frozen on the steering wheel, her heart pounding with a dull, numbing ache. He never even saw her. And that, somehow, hurt more than anything. She had imagined so many endings. A reconciliation. A dramatic fight. Some grand moment where they would stand face to face and really talk about everything. But reality was quieter. Colder. This was the ending she had earned. Finally, she forced herself to drive away. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just drove. When she got home, the silence of her empty house wrapped around her like a weight she could no longer ignore. She had wanted excitement, adventure, something to make her feel again. And she had gotten it. Just not in the way she expected. Vanessa poured herself a drink and curled up on the couch, staring at nothing. The house still smelled like Gavin, like the life they had built together, and yet it wasn't his home anymore. It wasn't hers either. The thought hit her suddenly, sharply. There was nothing left for her here. No husband. No marriage. No friends. She could stay in this house, in this town, surrounded by the wreckage of her choices, or she could start over. Really start over. She didn't know where she would go. She didn't know what came next. But for the first time in a long time, Vanessa didn't want to chase some fleeting thrill. She wanted something real. And this time she would have to build it from the ground up. As she took a slow sip of her drink, a thought settled in her mind, quiet but certain. She wouldn't make the same mistake twice. And with that, Vanessa stood, walked to her bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. It was time to go. The end.